combination of actually a couple different topics. We're going to start off talking about what we call the characteristics of living things. And that's sort of what our question today was about. What characteristics do all living things share? And we'll talk about that, talk about some of those details, and we'll talk a little bit about this concept of spontaneous generation. And then we will move on and talk a little bit about evolution and natural selection, and that'll be the end of this unit. So it'll take us, like I said, maybe a week or so. So you see some pictures on this first slide that are related to all those different things. So you have some vocabulary that we're going to use. To refer back to. I'm going to skip that. All right, so characteristics. Sometimes difficult to come up with these characteristics of living things because there are some non-living things that might seem to exhibit certain characteristics that living things have. Okay? But all living things have these 6 characteristics in common. We'll just list them and then we'll talk about them individually. First off, all living things are made of cells. That's a key one. Whether it's a bacteria or a protist or a mushroom or a sugar maple tree or a person, they're all made of cells. Cells are the building blocks of life. Like you guys said in your question today, all living things use energy in some way. All living things grow. They respond to changes in their environment. They're capable of reproducing. And they are all adapted to their environment. Those are the characteristics of living things. And so any living thing, whether it's a mushroom or a whale that you could think of, has all 6 of those characteristics. Okay. So we'll talk about them individually. First off, cells. Now, did you guys ever study cells in elementary school? No? Okay. Well, we're going to be studying them as in one of our upcoming units. And cells are the basic unit of life. All life is made of cells. Now, what's the smallest living thing you can think of? An ant. Ant? Smaller than an ant. Bacteria. Even a tiny one little bacteria, that is a living thing. That is its own self-sustaining organism. But it's made of just one single cell. Whereas a human, for example, is made of trillions of cells. But all living things are made of at least one cell, often more. And cells are small, they're microscopic. We generally look at them in the microscope. These are some cells from an onion. Okay, we'll look at those types of cells in a few weeks. And like I said, some organisms are single-celled. We call those unicellular. Others are multicellular. The bacteria you guys just named is unicellular. Humans are multicellular. All living things are made of cells. You guys also came up with this next one. All living things need energy. Okay? Energy is required for all life. To maintain an organism's internal conditions, to find energy, to get water, to reproduce, all of those things requires energy. There's 2 big categories of living things, autotrophs and heterotrophs. You guys heard these terms? No? Okay. Where do we get energy?
Food.
Food that we eat. So you get energy that's going to keep you alive by consuming things. When you ate that Pop-Tart for breakfast this morning, you're using that energy right now to keep you alive. We are what we call heterotrophs. We have to eat things for energy. What is something that's a little bit different in terms of getting energy? Sophia, what did you say when I first asked this question? Where do we get energy?
The sun.
Yeah, some living things do get their energy directly from the sun. What do we call those things? Evan?
They're like natural objects that.
Yeah, but so are we. We're natural objects, really. Okay? Plants. They're called autotrophs. Autotrophs, auto means self, troph means food. They do not need to eat anything. They can obtain their energy directly from the sun. So what do we think of as an example of autotrophs? Trees, plants. All plants are autotrophs. Heterotrophs, which are what we are, they cannot obtain energy directly from the sun. They need to obtain energy from eating other organisms. Is a Pop-Tart another organism?
It's not living.
Was it once living?
Yes. Yeah.
How was a Pop-Tart once living?
It was
Well,
a
it could be
blueberry.
blueberry.
It was a liquid.
It was, what's in a Pop-Tart?
Green.
Lots of sugar,
Oh yeah, wheat.
flour. Okay, those things come from what?
Plants.
Plants. So yeah, Pop-Tart was once living in one way of looking at it. Some heterotrophs eat plants, some eat other animals. I do not.
Well,
Okay, all living things grow. What does that mean, grow?
bigger.
Get larger over their lifetime, increase in size. For example, this seed that is germinating obviously is growing, it's getting larger. You obviously right now are growing. You hopefully are growing a couple inches, inch every year or so or whatever. Growth also includes what we call development, which is when some organisms, not only do they grow larger over time, like a human or a tree, but they actually change form. Something like a butterfly emerging from a caterpillar, a tadpole metamorphizing into a frog. Those are also examples of growth. Living things respond, react to changes in their environment. And you guys might have this a little differently, right? Sorry. So, I'm going to have you write this definition of homeostasis. So fill in that respond. So respond just means reacting to something. Responds means to react. So a stimulus is some information that's coming into an organism. And organisms respond to those stimuli. For example, if something comes flying at you, you're taking in some information. There's a stimulus. You see an object approaching you. And you respond. And how do we respond? By catching it, by cowering in your chair. Okay? By flinching. Those are examples of responding to some external stimulus. Okay. There's also sometimes responses to internal stimuli, conditions within our body. What's that? Yeah, you on the bottom, I guess, write homeostasis and write that definition. Homeostasis is a very important term. Homeostasis means responding to changes internally in order to maintain the proper conditions. So homeostasis is basically keeping proper balance internally. So, for example, our bodies maintain, because we're warm-blooded, a relatively stable body temperature. What is our typical normal body temperature supposed to be? 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. Okay? If our internal body temperature drops, okay, you're out on a very cold day, you have no jacket or anything, your internal body temperature starts to drop. Your body responds to that. Okay, responds. It realizes your body temperature is getting down and it does something. What does it do?
It shivers.
Shivers, causes you to start shivering. Shivering is your muscles contracting very, very quickly. Okay, and that helps warm up your body because your muscles working generates heat. And so by shivering, you're warming your body back up. So your body's adjusting. It's maintaining homeostasis. It's responding. And at the same time, if you go outside, it's hot out today, you're at soccer practice, your body temperature starts to rise, so your body maintains homeostasis by doing what? Sweating. And as sweat evaporates from your skin, it cools you down. So that's your body's way of maintaining homeostasis. There are other ways as well of maintaining body temperature. For example, if you ever, I don't know, do your parents sometimes not turn on the heat till late in the year and it's cold in your room? How do you sleep? What position does your body take when it's really cold? You curl up like in a little ball in fetal position, trying to keep all of your body heat in as close as possible. Or like in my house, we don't have air conditioning in our house, so in the middle of the summer it's super hot and humid. What kind of position does your body take when you're sleeping, right? Stretched out, just like trying to allow as much of that body heat to escape as possible. And that's why you take those positions. You might not think about it, but it's your body trying to maintain homeostasis. Okay, you ate that frosted Pop-Tart for breakfast, and now you're getting a sudden rush of sugar into your blood. Do you know how our body responds to that?
Sounds crazy.
No.
Then you go to sleep.
Diabetes.
You're getting there.
Sugar rush.
You get sugar in your bloodstream. What happens, our body realizes this, puts a hormone into our blood called insulin. Insulin
Oh, but it-
tells our cells, hey, too much sugar in the blood, we need to get rid of some. And they take it in and store it. So that's, again, your body maintaining homeostasis. Your little sister coughs on you because she's got a cold. And then you get a cold virus into your body. How does your body respond?
Blow your nose.
Well,
You get symptoms.
your body temperature starts to rise. You get a fever. Your body starts to fight off this infection, hopefully. Your coach makes you run 6 hill sprints because you were talking on the bench too much when the other team was playing.
Did you do that to the soccer team?
No, my players are always paying attention on the bench. Some teams might. Not maybe any names. So anyway, as you're running up that hill, exercising for the 5th time, your body's using up lots of oxygen to move those muscles. How does your body adjust? By breathing faster. Okay, you get to the bottom of the hill and you're breathing hard because your body's trying to maintain homeostasis. So these are all responding to internal stimuli, changes inside of us. But our body also responds to external changes.
You don't have those ones in our picture.
Yeah, that's okay. If you walk into a dark room, what happens to your
Pupils
pupils?
dilate.
The pupils dilate. Why are they dilating?
Let light in.
To let more light in because it's very dim. You don't worry about writing these. Then you turn on and there's a bright light.
They dilate and get smaller.
They don't dilate. Dilate means open up.
Oh. Shrinks.
They shrink, they constrict. Get smaller because you don't need as much light coming in. That's why, like, if you've been playing outside, then you go in like your house or go in the basement, like you can't see anything for a while. right? It's because when you're outside, your pupils are really small because of the sunlight. Then when you go in a dark room, it takes a while for them to open up, so you're not getting much light into your room. Or if you've been in the dark and then you wake up and then it's super bright in your room and like it hurts your eyes because you were sleeping, your eyes are closed, your pupils are wide open. But then it takes them a while to shut back down, so when that bright light shines in, it hurts your eyes. Okay? So these are examples of how our body responds to an external stimuli. Another one, for example,
Oh, Jesus. Clap. Oh, that's
if you hear a loud noise,
You're lit.
how does your body respond to that external stimuli? You jump. Okay? You might yell. Your heart rate might speed up. Okay? Somebody really scares you, your stomach might feel weird.
I don't know if that was good.
All right. So these are all examples of responding to stimuli, both internal and external. Living things reproduce, which means make more of the species. Obviously, a species must be able to reproduce if it's going to stay in existence. What happens when species cannot reproduce? They become extinct. We're going to talk a lot more about reproduction in the future, but we break reproduction in two categories generally when we're talking about this. Sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Some organisms reproduce sexually, some reproduce asexually, some can do either. Depends on the species. So in sexual reproduction, what we have is the combining of genes from two different parent organisms. Okay? So there's a mixture of genes, of chromosomes. And the result are offspring that are not identical to either parent. They have some mixture of traits from both parent organisms. We call that variation. So that the offspring of sexual reproduction are not the same as either parent. They have a mix of traits. Organisms reproduce sexually. Most animals, plants reproduce sexually. Other species, other types of organisms as well. Asexual reproduction is a form of reproduction in which one parent organism basically copies its DNA and then splits in two. Bacteria can reproduce asexually. Some protists can. Plants can reproduce asexually. And so only one parent is involved and it copies its DNA, but the offspring are basically identical to the parent because it's just a copy. And finally, our last characteristic of living things, all living things are adapted to their environment. They've evolved over time. We're going to be talking about evolution here tomorrow. But what evolution is, it's a gradual change in a population over a long period of time. And because species have evolved over time through this process of natural selection, they've become adapted to their environment. They have certain characteristics, certain traits that allow them to be successful. Right? And that's what we call adaptations. An adaptation is some trait that an organism has that helps it be successful. What animal is this?
A beaver.
A beaver. What is an adaptation a beaver has that allows it to be successful in its environment, in its role? Evan?
Its teeth.
Its teeth. What are its teeth? How are they helpful to a beaver?
Because it can chop trees.
Yeah, it can cut down trees to build its dam and lodge and so forth. And so that's a useful adaptation. What's another adaptation a beaver has?
Oh.
Karina?
Its feet,
What about them?
they're web so they can swim.
Has webbed feet allowing to swim well through the water. Jackson?
Its tail.
Its tail. What is it used for?
It helps like build the dams.
Helps build, its dam and build its lodge. Good. So those are all features that have evolved in beavers over a long period of time that help it to be successful. Beavers are adapted to living in the water and in the forest and so forth. They're successful there. Now, one important point here is this, this line. Because people sometimes say this incorrectly. So, and we'll talk more about evolution, but an individual cannot evolve. An individual organism cannot adapt. So, a species can over time. So this beaver, for example, that's one individual. Let's say conditions in its ecosystem changed, and now having this dark fur made it stand out, and so it might be more vulnerable to predators. Could this beaver change its fur color?
No.
Could it adapt and suddenly have lighter colored fur?
Yes.
No. Not this individual beaver.
I think that's later than some.
One individual organism is basically born one way and stays that way its entire lifetime. But is it possible over a long period of time that a
Yes.
group of beavers could adapt and have lighter fur over time? Yes. A population can change and evolve, but not one single individual. If we look at this made-up creature here, it has some adaptations, like a spiny tail. What might a spiny tail be useful for? Well,
Protection.
protect it from predators, yeah. And if we look at any animal, anywhere around the world, we can identify different characteristics they have, and we can figure out how they were helpful for it, what kind of adaptations they were. I'm going to skip the other parts of that. Now, one interesting thing are viruses. Does anybody know anything about viruses?
They can make you sick.
They can make you sick. Some things that are caused, illnesses caused by viruses, a cold, okay, the flu, okay, measles, chicken pox. Okay. These are all caused by viruses. And a virus is something scientists had a hard time classifying. Is it alive or is it not alive? What do you think? Is a virus a living thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Most of you probably think yes, but actually there's a couple things. Viruses are not made of cells. Okay. So that's something that takes them out of this category of living things a little bit. They also cannot reproduce on their own. How do anyone know how a virus reproduces?
Are they contagious?
What's that? They are contagious.
Oh. By time, they just multiply?
No, they can't do it on their own. Like a single virus cannot make new copies of itself.
Spread them?
You're closer.
I was wondering if it's not like alive, then like how does it go around?
It just gets passed on through people or animals or whatever coughing and spreading it through the air. What a virus does is it only can reproduce by invading a cell. It injects its DNA into the cell and kind of hijacks the machinery within a cell to make new copies of it. So one individual flu virus, it would be tiny, tiny little thing, but it could not reproduce on its own. But if you allowed it to infect the cell, it would hijack the cell, use the cell to make more copies of that flu virus. The cell eventually explodes, and then it spreads more of those viruses, and they can take over cells. So they're not able to reproduce on their own. So scientists have a hard time sort of classifying them. They have DNA and stuff, okay, but they're not really made of cells. They can't reproduce on their own, so sometimes they're categorized as living, sometimes non-living. All right, let's read a little bit about this experiment. Because now we're going to start to talk about this concept of spontaneous generation. And this is an actual experiment. This is taken word for word. It's a quote from a work of Jean-Baptiste Van Helmont. Here's the experiment that Van Helmont did. He was trying to understand where living things came from. So his experiment said, if you press a piece of underwear soiled with sweat together with some wheat in an open mouth jar, after about 21 days, the odor changes. And the ferment coming out of the underwear, penetrating through the husks of wheat, turns into mice.
Whoa, what?
But what is more remarkable is that mice of both sexes emerge, and these mice successfully reproduce with mice born naturally from parents. And what is even more remarkable is that the mice which come out of the wheat are not small mice, not even miniatures or aborted mice, but adult mice emerge.
Wait,
So Van Helmont did this experiment. He put a bunch of sweaty underwear in an open mouth jar. He put some wheat on top of the sweaty underwear, and he let it sit for 21 days. And then noticed, coming out of the wheat, were full-grown adult mice after a few weeks.
No way.
And so he said, hold on, he said, yeah, this happened. He recorded it. He said, given, if you have sweaty underwear, the fumes escaping from them going through the wheat somehow turns the wheat into mice.
I want to try that.
I know what it is. Actually,
Hopefully you're not trying this in your bedroom in the corner right now as we speak, but maybe you just don't have the wheat.
Wait, what kind of
Wheat from a farm. So, do you think this is a legitimate conclusion?
Yes.
I hope it is. I really hope it is.
Can you get mice from underwear and wheat?
No.
Okay. What was probably actually going on here?
Oh, fake mice.
Meg?
The mice were trying
Yeah, probably. Mice were attracted to the wheat, the sweaty underwear. They can nest in there. And Van Helmont left it for 21 days. He wasn't exactly probably keeping watch over it 24 hours a day for 21 days. So that's probably what was going on, is that mice were climbing in, eating the wheat. How could he have easily solved this problem in his experimental design? Karina?
put like a lid on the jar.
Yeah, if he had put a lid on it, if it was covered, do you think he would have found mice emerging from the sweaty underwear? Anyone gonna try this experiment at home?
Yep.
I'm gonna
Their
say
parents
that
might not be
I'm
thrilled about it.
I need
All right, now this may sound kind of silly to us, but this is part of a theory that people held for a long time called spontaneous generation. And what people believed was that given the right conditions, living things could be created from non-living matter. Spontaneous generation is a theory that life could come from non-living material in certain situations. And we may find that kind of a silly idea right now. But it agreed with certain observations that people might make. For example, people knew that if you left a piece of meat out, after a couple days, little white worm-like maggots would just emerge from the meat. And so they thought that in some cases, the meat was turning into maggots. If you had a piece of bread and left it uneaten for a while, all of a sudden the bread would turn into this living organism, this fuzzy organism, this mold. If they had some soup or broth, it would turn into these living microorganisms. Bacteria would smell bad. It would make you sick if you ate it. In the springtime, frogs would just emerge out of the ground, out of the mud around ponds. And so they thought that the mud in the springtime turned into frogs. Now, did this actually happen? Was the meat turning into maggots? Was the mud turning into frogs?
No.
No, we have other explanations
Ew.
for these things. But it took a while for scientists to sort of show that these were not examples of spontaneous generation. There were other explanations for this. And so tomorrow we're going to learn a little bit about 3 scientists that studied this idea of spontaneous generation and did experiments to prove